Schools teach us that our ideas need to be correct. But in the real world, being right just isn't enough. To truly differentiate ourselves, our ideas must be both correct and novel. To be a successful scientist, for example, you need to discover things that others haven't realized yet. To start a successful company, you need to go after something that others haven't figured out. To be a successful writer, you need to share insights that feel new and fresh to others. So if we want for our kids to come up with novel ideas that lead to this kind of success, we need to teach them how to think differently. I realized this while reading one of Paul Graham's essays, How to Think for Yourself. Graham explains that different jobs require different levels of independent thinking, and it's important for kids and adults to acknowledge this distinction when deciding what kind of work they want to do in the future. Now, not all jobs require you to think differently. In fact, most of the traditional jobs don't require this skill. To be an administrator, for example, all you need is to be right. It's not essential that everyone else be wrong. So where am I going with this? I'd argue that the most important and exciting jobs today require us to think differently, to be creative, to think outside the box, and to develop ideas that others haven't. And therefore, we should help our kids magnify these qualities. Yet schools do exactly the opposite. In school, we spend most of our time consuming existing knowledge rather than producing new insights. We strive for correctness instead of novelty, and we're encouraged to do what everyone agrees is a good idea. Perhaps this is why conventional-minded people greatly outnumber independent-minded people in the real world. Most of us never stop to think about this. We grow up to play the game that everyone else plays, simply because that's what they teach us in school. But it's only when we play a different game that we get different, and I would argue better results. So, how can we equip kids to play and succeed at a different game? And how can we help them become more independent-minded? Graham argues that this quality of thinking for yourself may be largely inborn, but there seems to be a way to teach it, or at least not suppress it. Here are 3 things that you can try with your kids. Number 1, cultivate an attitude of skepticism. Being a skeptic isn't a negative thing. It's actually the most optimistic approach, because if ideas can be criticized, that implies that they can be improved. It doesn't necessarily mean to question everything out loud. Just develop a resistance to being told what to think by examining things before you let them into your head. This reinforces not accepting things for face value. For example, when you hear someone say something, stop and ask yourself, is that true? Frame this as a habit for your kids, and you'll see the difference in their train of thought. Number 2, surround yourself with independent-minded people. We are imitative creatures, so it's important for us to choose wisely who we surround ourselves with. Unfortunately, it's really hard to find independent-minded people in traditional school and work settings for all the reasons that I mentioned earlier. But the good news is that the internet is changing this. You can now help your kids find an online community of other kids, older and younger, from different backgrounds who crave creativity and learning new things. Having kids hear other people say surprising things will encourage them to do the same. I recommend you check out Synthesis, the online community where kids learn how to think for themselves. Number 3, cultivate curiosity. Encourage your kids to seek out topics that engage their curiosity and make sure that they're making time to explore the things that they're interested in. You can start by finding out how much of the work they're doing in school engages their curiosity. If the answer is not much, then they need to find something else, a complement to school that actually does. Maybe your kid loves to watch you cook. A simple way to do this is just let them pick an idea and create a meal for the family. Kids are much smarter than we give them credit for, and much more curious than we think. We should applaud them when we see them challenging the status quo or digging deeper into their curiosities. We should help them find their own game, what they're good at, and encourage them to master it and develop their own ideas around it. They will be happier adults and better prepared for the jobs of the future. If you want to learn more about how kids are learning to think in today's world, check out my video on how Legos might actually be reducing our creativity.